Welcome to Flashback Friday on Harvesting Wisdom. Today, we revisit a powerful moment from our archives that continues to inspire sustainable change. Let's journey back and rediscover the wisdom that shapes our future.
Welcome back to another podcast of Harvesting Wisdom. I'm your host, Mike McMahon. I have Eilecia Bovard, who is in Germany right now. And I just want to remind everyone that the purpose of our broadcast is to tell the stories of individuals and organizations that embrace sustainability, land management, climate smart agriculture, and we believe that that sustainability is the cornerstone for a thriving world and for future generations. So welcome, Alicia. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
Great. I'm going to read a little of your bio, but you kind of chime in. I got a lot of words here. So you're basically the way we've got it written down as a dedicated social impact entrepreneur and sustainability engager. You're the co-founder, and this is the important thing, perfectfarm.com, which is perfect-farm.com. It's a transformative platform that supports a fair transition for livestock agriculture, aiming to reduce emissions and create new income streams for farmers. As the director of the Institute of Sustainable Wellbeing, you have crucial collaborations among a lot of different stakeholders to advance sustainable development goals. Currently, you serve as an ambassador for the EU Climate Pact group, and you're accelerating efforts to combat climate change. Through your work, you build bridges and empower change, inspire momentum for regenerative future where people and the planet thrive together. So I got that out. That's a lot. So let's go through. You and I were just talking about your history, and you really truly are a world citizen, which is really a cool thing because there's so much out there that is different than maybe our perspective as we grew up, right? Now, you grew up in San Francisco, which was always pretty progressive from a standpoint of any kind of social movement, right? But especially when we're looking at climate and sustainability. So you started there. You lived lots of places, South America and then Europe. Tell me about that journey. Tell me, what drove you to do all these things, and what came out of all that.
Yes, thank you for that great introduction and for sharing a bit about my story. So I'm a native Californian. I grew up in Northern California, Sacramento, San Francisco. I've also lived in great cities like New York City. I've lived in Santiago de Chile. I've lived in Berlin, Germany. I've lived in Spain as well. So I really consider myself a global citizen. Something that I think is a part of my journey is this California upbringing. I think very deeply ingrained in me is this sustainable way of living, this sustainable thinking. I mean, one of our favorite holidays growing up was celebrating Earth Day. So I think this might be kind of unique to the California lifestyle, but this is something that was always a part of my thinking, but didn't really show up in a strong sense until the past couple of years. So after my time in Spain, I really had my eyes opened to where a majority of societies are when we're talking about sustainable mindset and sustainable action. So this is where my journey with Perfect Farm began, and also the ambassadorship, as well as many other projects that I do.
That's great. Now, you just I can go down so many different roads because Joe and I were just in San Francisco doing podcasts. We go into different places and towns, and we find different examples of leaders in the space. So we podcasted with, I think, 5 or 6 different groups. We went to Stanford's farm, and we went up to a couple of wineries up north, Jackson. the Jackson family, which is one of the big ones, and looked at their sustainability movement and what they're doing with their agriculture. We went to the Argonaut Hotel. We went just a lot of different places and talked to people. And by the way, San Francisco is back. You know, it had its bad image, I think, through the pandemic in that area, but it really was just a joy to be in and just a lot of fun. It reminded me of kind of the old days when I used to go to San Francisco. And then you mentioned Santiago, Chile, one of the places I love going in the summer. I like to ski up above that, up in taking the mules up or whatever, up into the north part. Are you a skier, by the way?
I ski. I can't say I'm a skier, but I do enjoy skiing. Yes.
Did you ski while you're there in like El Colorado or any of those?
I did not, no.
Oh my God! So you're deprived. You have to go back. But and then you did talk to me about. So you have a master's from Vienna, and that University of Vienna. How did that, lead you a little bit? And you told me that kind of was kind of the starting point for what you thought you could do in the space.
Yes. Okay. So let's start there at the beginning. So I would like to actually start before the university degree, because I think that was really a pivotal moment for me to make this decision to be a climate leader, if you will. So I was living in Spain. I was living in a Mediterranean island called Mallorca. And it really became clear to me. Yeah, it's a beautiful destination, a paradise.
Yeah,
and at the same time, it was
I took all my management people to Mallorca for a meeting, but we went in the winter. Now, Mallorca in the wintertime is more or less shut down, but anyway, sorry to interrupt you.
It is the best time to go, I think, actually.
It's quiet.
Especially if you live in Europe and it's very cold. So it's really the best time. But yes, everything closes during winter. So living in Mallorca, although a paradise, still comes with its challenges, especially if we're talking about climate and sustainability, tourism and over-tourism, and demand on finite resources. So in that time that I had in Spain, I really had in front of me what I saw as current challenges related to sustainable mindset, sustainable action, and just sustainable business practices. So this inspired me to want to go deeper. Well, what is this thing that we call sustainability? What is truly sustainable? And this is where the journey began. I studied with United Nations and their sustainability courses, the Lund University in Sweden as well, and their sustainability courses. And this led me to Tomorrow University and the University of Vienna Executive Academy. They had a partnership program where it was a Master of Science in Sustainability, Entrepreneurship, and Technology. And after all of my self-studying, I realized, yes, this is the combination of study that I need to be able to realize the change that I want to see. Now, I went into the program with one idea, but I actually left the program with something completely different. So Perfect Farm, it was a Tomorrow University, University of Vienna inspired project. And I would be happy to go deeper into that as well.
Sure. Tell me about that. So it was inspired by the university, but you just said you pivoted. You went in with one idea and came out with the other, which, you have to adapt, right? If you're going to be effective. We all think we're going in with a preconceived notion of how we're going to fix something, and then we realize that the only way to do it is to fix ourselves first and be adaptable.
Yes, I agree with you. Absolutely. So I came in with the idea that I was going to focus on building local projects, local impact projects that would have an influence on not only the local residents of the island, but also Greater Spain, and then invite other European citizens into the conversation and dialogue as well. So I was really focusing on social impact projects that I wanted to build. That was the inspiration for joining the program. While I was in the program, as entrepreneurship is a major pillar, we were invited to examine gaps in the food system, especially within the European Union. And it was at that point that I realized that there was a lot of policy and regulation coming into play in Europe that was going to greatly burden agriculture. So the farmers that live within the EU that need to comply with these new policies and regulations. And I realized that there is a real need there to support them in this transition. There's an economic need, there's an educational need. So first we thought to find a way to meet the needs of the farmer in connection with that regulation. And this, again, was inspired by a project at the university, which evolved into a founding of a company, which is Perfect Farm. So we used this assignment to go deeper and deeper into the topic of livestock farming. What are the emissions connected to livestock farming? How can they be reduced? And also put ourselves on the side of the farmer. So we are pro-farmer. We wanted to find out what are the technologies that they're interested in that would help them to reduce their emissions, but also connect them to diverse income streams. So for example, if we're talking about dairy farmers, this could look like a biogas plant installation. Biogas plant has the potential to produce energy, which they can use on their own farm to reduce their energy consumption and therefore costs. They can also connect to the main grid where they can have access to new income streams. Beyond that, we also were certifying the farmers to connect to the carbon market, the voluntary carbon market. So this is kind of a controversial topic for some people, but I'd love to talk about it because I think it's a powerful financing mechanism, especially for the sustainable transition. And if we're talking about farmers that bear the brunt of the investment, this is something that could really support them to do these emission reduction projects in a way that they can succeed.
Yeah, what's kind of interesting, and we don't want to go political, right? But all farming is subsidized. Farming has been subsidized in the United States for years and years and years. Sometimes those subsidies take us in what I consider a bad direction, sometimes in a good direction. But to be a farmer, I think I had some farmers on the podcast a while back that basically told me, if you're a farmer, you're going to have one bad year that can take you out of business. They said it was maybe every 4 or 5 years, but at least every 6 or 7 years. So you can't, if we want to have food to eat, right, we do have to support the farmers or at least be there as a safety net for them when they're doing some of the things they're doing. And in the U.S., there's a lot of pressure on, we're getting more and more into drought situations in the West. And especially in California, all my friends that farm in California have been reduced so dramatically in the course of their lives, in the course of their careers, on how much water they can use. And of course, that does spur new, methods, drip and different things that you do with the soil. But the bottom line is, they need a little bit of help along the way, and some of it is just information as well. Now, in the United States, we have extension services, and there's a lot of extension services in other countries too. But we're in Africa, for instance, doing nonprofit work, and finding any kind of extension service is very difficult. And even the universities, they're showing farmers how to do things, but the farmers are just resource extremely poor. They can't afford equipment. They can't afford to even be able to pull water out and to do anything like that. And so they're a lot more vulnerable than you would want them to be if you're trying to feed the people of Malawi, for instance, with agriculture. So, you had just mentioned you went to the UN, a school up in Sweden. I just spent the last month in Norway, Sweden, and in Stockholm, but Copenhagen. I went up there, and again, I'm coming from here. I've been, all over, but I'd never really been to that north part, and I thought, oh my God, they're doing it all. I really did. It's like the city, people walk. The city, people ride bikes. A lot of people don't even own cars, right? They've cleaned the waterways up. They're transitioning in Norway to electric. I was on an electric, like an amazing electric boat going through the fjord. And, passing next to us was kind of like history, right? We saw a big cruise ship coming, and it was emitting like 10 stacks of fumes, and it was so noisy. And when it left, and we were on that electric boat, and it's a big boat that we're on, everything was quiet. You know, when sometimes you're on a boat and you smell that diesel and you want to throw up, you know what I mean? None of that. So the bottom line is that the possibility for a better world is there. And I'm thinking right now it might be out, it may be up there in Scandinavia already. And I think they're 80%, already with renewable power for their energy, the architecture, the way that the city planning is done, even their politics. I don't want to get into that, but our system is it's working, but it's very dysfunctional. So anyway, you were in Sweden. You went into the UN school there. What do you think? I mean, you've been throughout Europe, and Europe's not without its problems either. It's not necessarily the easiest place if you're an entrepreneur and a farmer. And I think it's a lot like Napa Valley. We did some podcasts up in Napa and Sonoma, and the price for land now in Napa Valley is $1 million an acre. Well, guess what? $1 million an acre, you cannot. It's not potentially profitable to do any kind of farming. I mean, you can't even grow poppies or weed and make enough money to pay mortgages when you have that, right? So the deal is even in Europe, thing about Europe is you got a lot of old family. If you were born into a family that has land and that has farms, then you're there. The opportunities are not necessarily as easily made as they might be in the States. That's the way I'm kind of visual. What's your kind of take? I mean, you've literally you went East Coast, West Coast, you've been to South America, you've been throughout Europe. Before we get in, and we'll get in next into specifically what you're doing, but what's your overall feel for, and are you an optimist about all of this as you start seeing things working, or it's frustrating still for you?
Well, I have to be an optimist if I keep doing this work. So I'm definitely an optimist. I do believe we're at a very critical point in time right now where we can actually affect change. And this is something that will work in humanity's favor. If we can manage to mitigate our emissions, to reduce the impacts for what climate change is bringing, then I'm all for this. I will do whatever I can to make sure that I'm engaging and teaching and doing whatever is possible to get people on board with this, because we need everybody. Everybody is going to play a role here. It's not just the farmers. I think it's really great that you brought up some really leading cities, such as Copenhagen and even Norway as a country, and they're doing incredible things. Our pilot project with farmers are based in Norway. So it's really been incredible to learn from the farmers in Norway. What are they doing? What are they doing well? What are their challenges still? And there are two challenges that keep coming up again and again. And the first is financing. How is this going to be financed, this transition? How can we support farmers to take on this financial risk? Because it is a risk for the farmers to make an investment in sustainable practices. And farmers, if anyone knows any farmers, you'll understand they're quite risk averse. So they're not necessarily willing to try new things.
Sure.
So this was our angle, to come in, what are they interested in? And let's talk to them about how they can maximize their ROI, their return on investment for that project. But that's one aspect, so the financing. The second aspect is climate change long-term impacts. So you mentioned that it isn't really a fruitful investment to buy land in California. You're not going to get your return for such an investment. And I would have to agree with you. I think this is also a unique point in time for agriculture and farmers to begin to develop a new frame of mind. So how can they diversify their offering? Classically, I think many farmers have stuck to a few products, and developing those few products, but now they're going to perhaps need to look at how to diversify them. And I'll give you an example. So if the proposed policy and regulation comes into play that the EU has for livestock farmers, this will over time require them to reduce the number of livestock animals they have on their farm. If they need to reduce the number of livestock animals they have on their farm, this reduces their potential for revenue. So how can we support the farmer to diversify? So one of the ways is through the energy production. They can also offer ecological services on the land that they have. So getting the farmers to have this new mindset is not going to be easy, but also preparing them to be more resilient. So this is an act of resilience when they begin to diversify how they're producing on their farm. Because we see regulation, the policy that will ask them to reduce their emissions. How can they still survive? How can they still thrive with this coming into play? Then, of course, you have the extreme weather events that will impact resources such as water. And this also impacts how chemicals are dispersed throughout the soil and the land. Also, the topsoil can get washed away, and then it's quite useless, the land. So there are many impacts that are here now and that will worsen over time. So we as consumers need to prepare for this to support the food industry, to support livestock. We need to understand what are the challenges and not just point blame, because this is often the conversation. And we also need to encourage the farmer to develop in another way.
So are you seeing subsidies coming along with new regulation where the government is like, okay, we're going to reduce your emissions, we're going to reduce your water, but we have a program where we want to encourage you for some new practices. Do they have much of that, or is that not as prevalent? And I guess it's on a country by country basis, really, right?
Yes, it depends on each country. So I'm living in Europe, so a lot of my conversation is around what Europe is doing, which I haven't been paying as much attention to US policy yet, but I get glimpses as to what California is doing and New York is doing. But Europe is leading the way in many ways for this sustainable transition, the green transition. We do have under the Green Deal, the Common Agricultural Policy. This is something that is put in place to support farmers in a financial way, and it is dispersed to each state within the EU, and each state then decides how they want to disperse that money. And that maybe depends on what are their needs. Maybe one state has more dairy farmers and another state has more potato farmers. So this would look very different in each state. But there are funds available for supporting a sustainable transition. But again, the big question is it going to work? And this is what prevents farmers from wanting to take the leap ahead. Where they want to see, is this going to make economic sense for me? What about the other investments that I made? Are those stranded assets? We're talking about different equipment, right? Or biogas plant installation. If they no longer can have as many dairy cows, it no longer has the same function. So this is something to really pay attention to. What are the farmers' needs, and understand that what the government provides is not going to get us all the way there.
So go ahead. I'll let you finish.
I could go on, but please go ahead.
What I want to do is drill down now and say specifically, okay, your platform, you're a communicator, and you're connector, and you're putting people together, and you're helping educate them. Because, look, if I'm a farmer, I'm not reading policy per se. I don't know what's happening in another country in the EU. I don't know methods that have worked, or methods even more important that have failed, because farmers, that's what they gravitate toward. You're right, they're super risk averse, right? And as soon as they find out that a particular initiative is not working, they're going to stay away from it. So you're in that place where you're using your skill sets to kind of bring people together. So walk me through a case study or a typical scenario that you've been engaged with.
Okay, so So, for example, we are doing pilots with farmers in Norway, and the farmers there have a particular interest in investing in a biogas plant installation on their farm because they understand that it will give them another revenue source as well as reduce their cost. So, the challenge with that is while Norway is offering great subsidies for their farmers, I would say probably some of the greatest in all of Europe, it's still not enough to cover the cost of the biogas plant. Now, this is a very expensive technology for a farmer to invest in. So the question is, how can they fund that gap in the funding? So they will be taking on the financial burden. They will take on the loans, but then we have another aspect, which is the banks. What are the banks willing to finance for the farmer? So the question then is, how can we support them to finance the technologies that they're most interested in that would support them to diversify their portfolio and reduce their emissions to comply with policy and regulation coming into play? So we have been talking to farmers to see what they think about the carbon market, the voluntary carbon market. Now, the voluntary carbon market, for anyone that doesn't know, is a financing mechanism where you can certify emissions reductions. Let's say you're a farmer, you install your biogas plant, and you can measure over time how the emissions will be reduced. This can certify for what are called carbon credits. These represent monetary credits for your emissions reductions. These credits that the farmer earns, they can either keep and claim as their own emissions reductions to show to their governments, or they can take these carbon credits and sell them on a carbon market. Now, one of the biggest challenges that we've discovered is that the voluntary carbon market pricing is very low. So this means that for a farmer that wants to install $1 million biogas plant on their farm, they are maybe getting a subsidy of 30% of that. They then need to cover the cost of the rest. They are doing all of the work and effort to reduce their emissions and to diversify and to have new income streams, but they still will bear the burden of that $700,000. So the carbon credit market is offering them per carbon ton that they reduce or don't emit, something like 10 or 15 euros, which is equivalent to about $15 to $20 in per carbon credit. Now this, okay, I don't want to jump down the rabbit hole, but this is not a fair price. Right. This is something, I mean, what the farmers are expecting by comparison, just to give you an idea, they're expecting 100 euros or dollars per carbon ton, per carbon credit. And actually, that would be fair because they're doing all of the work and the investment for this project that would not otherwise happen if they don't get the funding they need. So the voluntary carbon market could be a very important mechanism for funding these projects.
Yeah.
However,
we just had a guest from Italy who started a carbon market platform. I'll have to give you her information. But yeah, so you got the mandatory market and then you got the voluntary market. The voluntary market is kind of the space that an average farmer would get involved with, right? So, exactly. And you're right, that becomes kind of a complex. I think in terms of the carbon credit market as being very important, very vital. But I look at it a little like I would blockchain technology like Bitcoin. We know it's a better system, but it's still in its infancy, right? So it's still, and it's kind of, the other part of that is the regulation of it. So you're kind of responsible for finding somebody to regulate, to show, or to prove, for instance, that you're improving soil health or you're using less water or you're actually capturing that tonnage that you're talking about. So when you're doing what you do you connect with banks that help finance, or you got the carbon credit? There's different markets you can jump into or whatever. But I mean, part of it is just explaining it to farmers, and I think that's a primary thing that you're starting to do. And then are you, and I'm going to just ask a bunch of questions so you can kind of get confused and try to do your best to scramble out. But you're talking about biogas plants. In Africa, we use like some biogas systems with the compost that's being produced, but they're just enough to maybe run the cafeteria, gas burners for the stove and things like that. You're talking about a full-on facility. So do you work with a lot of these new technological, these tech companies that are building these facilities that can come in and help budget and maybe even they finance a little bit, or they have finance mechanisms? So I just asked you about 5 loaded questions. I'll let you run with it.
I'll see what I can recall. So we are not the technology providers. We are the aggregator platform. So we connect everyone so that they can have these conversations to make it happen. Okay. So we have partnerships with different biogas plant solution providers. And then depending on the farmer's location, we can connect them to different suppliers. Although usually, for example, in Norway, they already have an idea of who they want to partner with to build their biogas plant. Mm-hmm. So big challenge here is getting the financing. So we don't partner with banks because we see that farmers are already working with banks. They already have loans. Okay. They're already taking investments in. So we're wanting to provide a financing mechanism that will not put them in debt.
Defers some cost. Sure.
Exactly. So that's the idea with the carbon credit market. Now, the challenge that we see is that in order to get a higher price for a carbon credit, it doesn't make sense to put this on a general global market for sale, because the thinking is get the lowest price and offset your emissions. This is why it has a bad reputation. Offsetting, right? Can you prove it? Where is it happening? Is it long term? So the idea here is that we want to inset. So we are connecting farmers to. Yeah, it's a term that's not as commonly used, but this is where the carbon credits actually have a value for people within their own supply chain or value chain. So, for example, the producers are also going to be under regulation to reduce their emissions. So if the producers buy the carbon credits that their farmers, that they use their products from, if they buy the carbon credits from those farmers, then they're actually supporting the emissions reductions. And that's something, if they buy them, they can also claim for their own production. And so this is a nice circular approach towards emissions reductions. And it's
so give me an example. Give me an example of that. As a producer, so I know what a farmer does. And we know the technology comes in and they build this, and now you have this biogas plant. You got the logistics of actually taking that energy and moving it somewhere, right? But you're talking about producers. So when you're talking about producers, give me just an example of what a producer would be and how they would interact.
Okay, so from a livestock perspective, let's say you're raising cattle for consumption. Mm-hmm. And the producer, after you've raised your cattle to a certain weight and a certain age, would then usually you bring it to the producer and then they turn it into a meat consumption product, which is then sold to a retailer. So the producer also has emissions connected to their meat consumption product. They are working directly with the farmers who are bearing the brunt of the investment for the technology that they're seeking. Okay. So if you turn to the producer who also has a pain point, which is they also need to reduce their emissions, they also need their farmers to reduce their emissions because soon they're responsible for everyone in their supply chain to report and reduce their emissions, which is happening in the EU. This is something that we see will have potential high value at some point. And we're talking about medium to small, medium, large farmers, not the grand industrial farmers. So We're looking to group them together for these projects. So they have an interest in this type of reduction.
So they might have the logistics of transporting the cows, which they have emissions from their trucks. Now we're talking Norway, so there's got to be some boats involved, right? But still, the vast majority of, even though they're rapidly changing over, we're still burning a lot of fossil fuels in the transportation sector. They have their own plants where they have to take the animals in, and what do they call that? The arbiter that does one part, and then the butcher does the other part. But ultimately, they have costs. So now, if I look at it, if I take my farmer hat off and I put my meat producer hat on, I'm looking at it saying, okay, how do I pay for this? Ultimately, you got to pass it on to the consumer, which I think is legit. I think, the consumers, we've paid a very small amount for our food over these last many, many decades or this last century. And it's just a perspective of you get X number of dollars, how much you spent on different things. And food has always been kind of subsidized. It's always been low priced. So how do they, if I'm that producer, does the producer come to you too and say, hey, how do I do this?
Well, there's interest for sure. I think we're looking at a shift in thinking, and this is our biggest challenge, a shift in mindset. So now producers and farmers are starting to become aware of the voluntary carbon market. What are carbon credits? Is this valuable for me or not? When you turn to someone that's directly connected in their supply chain or value chain, there is a higher value to these carbon credits. So we believe over time, we will be able to sell these carbon credits within the farmer's value chain for a premium price. So this won't look like 10 euros a carbon credit. We might not be able to get to 100, although I do foresee it in the next 2 decades. I do think that we could get it for 45 or 50 euros per carbon ton if you're insetting. Now, the biggest challenge that we see with Perfect Farm is this shift in mindset. First, around the idea of a carbon credit, and second, around the pricing. Why pay a premium? And this is where systems thinking comes into play. And this is why the consumer as well should be brought into this conversation. And you're absolutely right. I agree with you. The consumer can play a major role here in supporting this transition, in supporting the farmer, supporting the producers, and really in general, just paying a fair price for their food. But this is where we need to think about the system. So when we have a healthy farm, then we have a healthy environment. So if we have emissions reductions, we have better air quality. If we have organic and more regenerative practices, we have better quality water. We have also better quality soil and nutrition content in the food. So for the consumer at the end, if they don't have a connection to the process of agriculture, regenerative agriculture, or even understand the pain points of the farmer, it will be hard to convince them to pay that higher price. But I think this is the job to be done.
Yeah, and it's the governing of the commons. I think I can't remember. Elizabeth wrote that book. I can't remember her last name, but the idea is that we all share common goods, but clean air, clean water. It's not being. I'm going to use the word taxed. It's not being paid by the people who are polluting, right? And ultimately, we all are taking advantage of that. We're all conspiring. Is one of our taglines is we've all taken a bite out of the apple. So the idea is that when I go to the grocery store, I'm still looking for the best price, right? And I think food prices probably are subsidized maybe as much as 50%. Based on if they weren't, we'd be able to if they were to pay as a consumer, we wouldn't see the same kind of issues we have with pollution. And you're talking with cattle or with whatever animals that are being raised. It's I think estimated 28% of the methane comes from agriculture. So it's a big thing and it's a real thing. So when you're working with all these various people, right? You're in Norway. So I think if there's a people on the planet, I look at Japan because when I go to Japan, it's kind of the same thing. They clean. If there's a piece of paper in the street, they pick it up. So they understand the importance of society, of a community, right? And Norway, I think has kind of always been that leader, right? Norway's always been the pacifist up there, not causing problems, just and they've helped. They've helped other countries too. They've actually, their history is just really kind of amazing. So you're working in maybe the best environment. What other countries are you actually working in right now, or working
So
farmers
currently
with?
we're working only in Norway. We've been looking to work with farmers in France, in Germany. Our initial focus is on cattle farmers, and dairy farmers, so wherever we can find them, Ireland as well.
Oh yeah.
Our initial pilot projects are in Norway. So I think for now we're going to focus on Norway and see how we run with our insetting there, and then we will expand to the other countries.
Now, do you
At the
physically
moment,
go? Do you go to any of these farms? Do you go and meet the people, or are we? You just that's a difficult country to get around in a little bit, But are you the farmers are down in Bergen or in Oslo, or the majority of the country's up north? And there's a lot of fishing going on. But do you literally like meet with people and go out there physically?
so my co-founder is on the ground. He is the one that is going to all of the farms around Norway and speaking to the farmers. So when
Okay.
we founded the Perfect Farm, my co-founder is based in Norway and I was based in Spain.
Ah,
So our next market was going to be to focus on Spain, but we thought, let's get our hands around Norway first. I have not been to the farms in Norway. I've engaged in many conversations with farmers. I've been on farms in Germany and in Spain, but I have not been to the farms in Norway,
oh, you're
which
gonna
is
love
also
it.
interesting.
Yeah, you're gonna love it. I got some pictures. It reminds me. It's a little odd. Kind of reminds me of walking through Connecticut for some reason, and you got all those old red barns everywhere. I mean, it's just really picturesque. They have so much water in Norway. That's the beautiful thing. But you just mentioned the co-founder. It'd be wrong for
Mhm.
us not to mention the co-founder's name, right?
Yes, absolutely. Nicholas Bo is the co-founder, and we both attended the university together. That's where we met.
Ah, great.
We decided to found the company together after doing this initial assignment.
Okay, so the
So
company currently is a nonprofit, or is it a for-profit entity?
it's a for-profit entity. So not for profit. It is for profit.
So basically your income base is as a consultant.
The income is based on the sale of the carbon credits.
Ah,
So
okay.
this is Yeah, so this is the mechanism with which we would make a revenue. It's also based on partnership agreements. So if we bring in a solution provider and the farmer decides to connect to that solution provider through our platform, then we also have a percentage on top of that
So I have a
if a contract
company.
is made.
I have a company that is we manufacture organic soils. So we sell to farmers, large farmers. We also retail a variety of products, right? But we're using all organic, locally mined and sustainable products. And we also have been trialing hemp for 6 years. So we have 38 and 39 trials of hemp, and we have some hemp that we're currently starting to grow and propagate, work with the seed. And there's a carbon gain with the hemp. There's a carbon gain for farmers with the thing. But it seems, and maybe it's a little better in Italy, it seems like it is like a long-term play, right? I know for what we do, we need to work with some group to evaluate our starting point and then our end point, and then you have to justify it. It seems like it takes several years to get paid from that. I mean, is it a quicker process where you are, or is it is it still a little bit of a tricky situation?
Yes, this is a tricky situation. So the farmers will be able to make a revenue from carbon credits, but we as farmers have a longer delay from when we would be able to
Right.
make a profit.
Yeah.
So you're looking at 2 to 3 years before you see profit turnaround. And that is mostly because, and it's unfortunate, and I really hope that there will be some great innovation here. This is where the carbon credit market is very slow. So anyone
Right.
that's building a carbon platform is dependent upon third parties. So one is the validating and reporting party, and the other one is the certifying body. So really, it takes a village to certify carbon emission reductions and
Yeah.
carbon
Yeah.
credit.
Yeah. So you got to
And
have
as
a lot of passion, a
leeway
lot of discipline, a lot
yeah,
of yeah, a
well
lot of
said.
gumption, right? So,
Hmm.
and what's interesting also to me in the states, a lot of farming is done by hired guns, So these are basically contractors that go out and do farming on other people's land, and I've always
Hmm.
felt like that it's not their land. So
Mm,
spending that extra dollar to put compost down or to worry about soil health, it doesn't fit into their budget. Legitimately doesn't fit into their budget. And it's kind of similar with the carbon game, right? You have to commit to being in that carbon game. You can't just start it for a year and then do something else. You have to really be committed for the next several years, right? So,
absolutely.
but
These are
with
long-term projects.
right. But with regulation, farmers don't have much choice. They have to be creative, right? Which is not something you'd use the word creative and farmer together, or risk averse and farmer together. That's better. But so the process right now is it been you finding what you're doing to be pretty well received because people can see this is the writing on the wall. We've got to go there somehow.
Well, we see a lot of pushback from farmers all over the world that are being forced into compliance from top-down policy and regulation. And this is the unfortunate part. Um, what we try to do is we frame everything within an economic framework. So we're not going to have this conversation unless we know that you're going to make a revenue as a farmer from engaging with us.
Great. Yeah.
And we're going to connect you to the right people, and we're going to make sure that you get a premium price for your carbon credits. So this is our main focus, and this is really pushing the boulder up the hill. The market is not quite there yet. We do see this dependency on third parties that really move at a very slow process, very slow snail's pace, if you will. So this is some of the biggest challenges with our platform. We do see farmers that are interested if we can get the price that they feel is fair for the work and investment that they're doing. So this is what we're working for, and this is the concept behind insetting.
Right. Okay. So it's a great space to be working. It's fun. You're doing something for the planet as well, and hopefully, and I'm all for it. I think the carbon credit game has to be used more. It has to become part of our vocabulary, right? But I'm going to shift, and I'll just ask you a few questions. I'll try to ask you one question that's confusing enough, I guess. The EU ambassador role. When did that all
Yes.
start, and what exactly do you do, and how does it tie into your business? How does it? So what do you what exactly do you have going on with that?
So I'm a part of what is called the EU Climate Pact Ambassadorship. And this is a voluntary role that I take on. And the idea here is that I get to engage with policymakers within the European Commission as an ambassador. And I also get to work with the general public on civic engagement. So my role, again, as a volunteer, is to engage as many people as possible in the climate change dialogue. And this is really in an effort to support the green transition that is happening in Europe and also to help meet the policy and regulation that's coming into play. So I don't work for the European Commission, I don't work for the EU, but this is a role as a volunteer. And it's one
Great.
that I do with joy.
And you get to meet lots of different people who are involved in the game that you're still involved with.
Absolutely.
Now, what part of Germany are you moving back to?
Berlin,
Oh, Berlin.
Brandenburg, actually.
I
Yeah,
love
just
Berlin.
outside. I'm sure
Uh,
I'm going to meet some great farmers.
Yeah.
Brandenburg
Berlin's.
has some very famous farmers lately in
Yeah.
the regenerative agricultural space.
I
Go ahead.
just, I just, when I was in Europe, I flew over for the day to Hamburg and interviewed or did a podcast with a group, a nonprofit group. Something, I can't remember the name, but it was, they're doing work, nonprofit work. They're bringing water to Africa and Latin America, and they've got a great platform. They've been around for like 23 years, and they're pretty popular. They started a water company that the profits go to the nonprofit. You'll probably see it over there, and I should have not started talking about it without remembering the name, but really cool group of people over there. And yeah, I mean, I think the Germans are very conscious and aware of what's going on as well. So being there and being in Berlin, that's a fun city to be in. So, okay, let's kind of wrap up here. And what else did I miss? Did I miss anything that's critical that you didn't get out there?
We had a conversation before about what brought me to this space,
Oh
why
yeah,
Perfect Farm. And I am not coming from an agricultural space. I am not coming from carbon financing space. I'm definitely not coming from biogas plant installation space. I am a citizen that is concerned, that wants to see change, and I want to be a part of the change. So this has been the motivation for everything that I do. It has been the motivation for the founding of the Perfect Farm, for me participating as a Climate Pact Ambassador, for the founding of the Institute for Sustainable Wellbeing, as a climate project leader, where I met your co-founder Joe with Al Gore. And this is all about empowering me to see the change that I want to see, but also being a player in realizing that change. So I'm here to say that you don't need to come from these backgrounds to make a difference. You can do great things and make an impact, no matter who you are, no matter your educational level, no matter your prior work experience, as long as you spot the gaps, find out where the pain points are, and try to come up with solutions, either within your own community or connect to the communities that are, you can make things happen.
that's great. I was about to ask you a question that we use for mostly for climate or anybody really actively engaged in sustainability, right? And that question is why bother? And it's a real question that every citizen asks. You know, if you're the only one on your street, on your block, or in your apartment that is composting or separating your waste out. If everybody else is drinking out of plastic water bottles except for you, and it seems like whatever efforts you make, it's you're a drop in a bucket, right? So I just asked the question, why bother? I think you already kind of answered it there, but that would be the question I would have for you to talk to other citizens who are sitting watching what we're talking about. Why bother?
Mm-hmm. Wow, that is a big question. I mean, this is humanity on the line, really. But we can't have this conversation until we have a neutral playing field. And this is where science comes into play. So if you don't know about climate change, get the information, education that you need. Oftentimes we're receiving information in silos. And so we think only in the siloed information that we receive that this is how we can make an impact. But really, in order to understand how you as an individual can make an impact, you need to be able to see the entire system and all of the interconnections. Now, this sounds like a big feat, but there are amazing tools out there that can support you to get this information and understanding. One of them is a tool that I use. It's called Climate Fresk. It's available all around the world. You can search for it. There are many facilitators. And in 3 hours, you can see the entire picture of what we're talking about when we talk about climate change and the entire system and how everything is interconnected. And it starts with human behavior. So that's a great tool. And I will say also that you mentioned that why bother? We're just a drop in the bucket. But when we connect, we need to collaborate better. So if we can connect to other people that also want to make an impact, this is where we're no longer a drop in the bucket.
Right. And I think
we are a bucket full.
The concept of collaboration is really at the heart of what we're talking about, because if you look at the goals of global harmony, for instance, I think collaboration is one of them, and it's a critical piece, right? You talked about awareness, learning, and that is the starting point, right? But really, you're engaged in our nonprofit, which is Urban Farming Education. We're creating a platform for education from preschool to high school, where we talk about all of these issues of sustainability, right, and climate change and climate smart agriculture techniques. And the idea for us, and I see what you're doing as well, we're bridging the gap between information and action, because anybody can read a book and look at it, and then you don't know how to take action. And actually, if you do take action, sometimes you're so frustrated, you just say, the hell with it, I don't care, right? But you're bridging that gap, which is the critical thing is to be able to say, okay, we all know about it. Now, what are we going to do about it? Because you're right, we're all part of humanity. We all took a bite out of the apple. So now, how are we as individuals going to try to do the best part we can do? And part of it is just understanding, hey, we might have to pay a little bit more for our food. We may have to endorse regulations that are out there, or subsidies that might need to be very specific to keep that system rolling in the right direction. So anyway, it's been a pleasure to meet you. I don't think I'm going to Germany again for a while, but maybe we'll see you at one of the next climate summits that are out there, and we wish you well. We'll follow through. I've got to find I'll give you the name of the nonprofit. It's got a little bit of an odd name. And I also want to connect you with our podcast guest from Italy, who does do carbon credits there too, just to have a conversation and see what she's doing, if anything she's doing can help you. So appreciate you coming today. Thank you so much. And it's Eilecia Bovard with perfectfarm.com. And I wish you all the best. Thank you for joining the Harvesting Wisdom podcast. Click subscribe and like for ongoing insightful conversations. Explore our webpage for show notes and additional resources. Visit our guests' webpage for deeper insights. Your engagement is the foundation of our journey, and until next time, keep pursuing wisdom.